One, two, three.
Hi, Dave. That's you? It's Rocio.
That is me. How do you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
All right. This is a new computer. I've never done a webinar on it before, but it has a built-in microphone, so I guess I'll use this rather than the telephone.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. We have 3 attendees on already, so we're just going to wait a few more minutes before we start.
Oh yeah, we got like 10 minutes to go. Do we really have 1,001 people registered?
No. I don't know why it always shows that number, but we really have like 73 people registered.
All right, 73 is pretty good. I'm happy with 73.
Yeah, that's a good number, I think, for today. So, we'll just start in a few minutes.
All right.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rocio Monreal. I work here at SAGNY, Programming Manager. Thank you all so much for joining us on the Free Regional Association webinar. Today, our presenter, David Feldman, will be speaking about prospecting in the 21st century. I ask that you keep your phone lines on mute so that we can hear David. And David, whenever you're ready.
All right, I'm pretty much ready. Can you give me control of the...
Yep, I'm switching that over.
And then I'll put my PowerPoints up and we'll be all ready to go.
Okay, you have it?
I have it. And here comes the PowerPoints, and here's my introduction. My name's Dave Feldman. I'm the president of David Feldman and Associates based in Cary, North Carolina. I have been working as a consultant in the industry for close to 25 years now. Before that, I actually sold promo and print and signage. I think I know something about the challenges that you all face on a daily basis. I certainly know something about prospecting, and I hope that by the time we get to the end of our hour together that you'll agree and that you'll feel that, that we brought some value. So let's start with this understanding. There's 3 reasons why you, all of you, each of you, should be diligent in prospecting for new business. Obviously is the possibility that you might make more money, but I think it's also important to recognize that you prospect to protect yourself from making less money. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that everybody who's taking part in our webinar today has lost a customer at some point. And I know in my own experience, sometimes you lose them because you mess up. Sometimes you lose them because your supplier messed up. Sometimes you lose them through no fault of your own. Sometimes they mess up. Sometimes they go out of the business, or you know, they start listening to your competitors who are willing to give the product away. The better you do as a prospector, the fuller your pipeline, the better you protect yourself against the likelihood that you're going to make less money due to customer loss. It's always a good idea to have people in that pipeline. And then a third possibility for those of you who are employees rather than the owner of the distributorship, some of you probably get pressure to prospect because your boss wants you to. So I might ask, which of these factors has the most influence on you? And I'll give you my answer. I don't really care, as long as at least one of them does, as long as you're always out there prospecting for new customers. Now, is it safe to say that there's potential to grow your business just on the strength of the customers you've already got? Yeah, sure, there is. But I still think it's a good idea to be looking for more customers for one of these 3 reasons. Now, I'd like to define prospecting for you. This is my definition. I call it an activity chain that starts with the identification of basically suspects, and it ends with the qualification of real prospects. Now, let me tell you what I mean by suspects. By my definition, there's 4 kinds of people on the buying side of the promotional product sales equation. I call them suspects, prospects, customers, and maximized customers. And the way this progression works, they're suspects when you think they might be prospects. You only call them prospects when you know for sure that they qualify. I'll tell you what that means in just a moment. You only call them customers when they're actually buying from you, and I'll tell you why I think that's an important distinction in just a moment. They become maximized customers when you're getting the maximum share of their business, and that's the name of the game, right? We want to get all the business we can, all the value we can out of each one of our individual customers. But let's back this up a step, and let me explain why I think you should never use the word customer unless you're talking about somebody who is actually buying from you. And this takes us to the factors that drive most people's buying decision. You know, when I do live seminars and we have the opportunity for dialogue, I often ask everybody, what do you think drives the buying decision? And the first 3 things I generally hear are quality, service, and price, sort of the unholy trinity that salespeople have had to deal with for an awful long time. But let me share an experience with you. I was once tasked with doing a focus group to determine the buying factors, to determine the buying influences. So I asked a group of buyers, what drives your decision? What do you care about? What are the things that you think about when you're trying to decide whether to buy from one company or another, one salesperson or another? And again, no surprise, quality, service, price. Those were the first 3 things they said, but I didn't feel like I was getting paid to accept such a shallow answer from them. So what I did was I pushed a little harder. I pressed a little harder. And I said, well, what exactly do you mean by quality? What exactly do you mean by service? What exactly do you mean by price? And we got some dialogue going. And then, after a little bit, one of the people in this focus group, one of the 7 people in this focus group, he raised his hand and he said, it occurs to me, we're talking around the wrong issue. We really are. Because every salesperson that I talk to promises me, bear with me a second. I apologize for that. I'm talking on my computer and my phone is sitting here and it rang. Hopefully it won't do that again. Okay. This guy said, I apologize. No, he said, I realize we're talking around the issue because every salesperson who calls on me promises service and promises quality and tells me that, that they're going to give me very attractive pricing. But I'm starting to realize right here, I'm having an epiphany right here, he said, that more than anything else, it's about whether I believe all of the promises. It really boils down, he said, to whether I trust the salesperson to actually do all the things they say they're going to do, to keep all the promises that they're making. And then everyone else in the room starts saying, well, yeah, that's right, it really is. It's more about trust than anything else. So here's the point I'm trying to make. Your customers trust you. They've already decided that they trust you to handle at least some of their promotional products needs. Your prospects and your suspects, the people that you're talking to but they haven't yet bought from you, the reason they haven't yet bought from you is because they don't trust you yet. And I'm not saying that you're not trustworthy. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just telling you that the reason these people haven't bought from you yet is because they don't yet know that anytime you say something's going to happen, that they can take that to the bank. They don't yet know that you will keep every promise you make. So I think it's a good idea to not use the word customer unless we're talking about somebody who has already demonstrated that. To keep you focused on the idea that with your suspects and prospects, your real challenge is to get them to trust you. It's to build trust. If you can do that, good things will happen. Now, let me back up one more step. You only call them prospects when you know for sure that they are prospects. I would bet that you've heard the term fully qualified prospect before. Let me tell you what that means. In order to consider whoever we're talking to fully qualified, and remember, That's what prospecting is about. Prospecting is about looking at suspects and trying to figure out if they are real prospects for you. And in order to be that, they need to pass 3 tests. The first is they got to buy exactly what you sell. The second is they got to buy enough of it to make pursuing them worthwhile. And the third is they got to actually show some interest in buying from you. I mean, let's think about they buy exactly what you sell. One of the great things about the promotional products industry is that most companies have some need or at least would benefit from using our products. But that still raises the question, do they buy enough of those products to make pursuing them worthwhile? And I don't know exactly what that number is, how much volume potential is enough. But I will tell you this, I think a lot of time gets wasted in our industry chasing minnows when the salespeople should be looking for bigger fish. So I'd like you to give some thought to how much potential does somebody have in order to justify the time it takes, the effort it takes, the resources that you have to put into trying to turn them into a customer. Now, the third element, in order to consider somebody a fully qualified prospect, they got to show some interest in buying from you. The people who don't return your calls, who don't return your emails, they're not showing you enough interest to pursue them. Now, let me back up on that just a moment. They're not showing you enough interest to consider them fully qualified prospects now. That doesn't mean that they might not show some interest in the future. But let's hold on to that thought for just a moment, because before I come back to it, I want to ask you to consider that in addition to the suspects, prospects, customers, maximize customers thing, I think you can also say that all promotional products buyers will fit into one of 5 categories. And I call those categories solids, liquids, gases, players, and price monsters. Solids are absolutely satisfied with their current supplier and they're not going to change. Are there solids in the marketplace? Yeah, there are, and I hope you know that for a fact because you have solids among your own current customers. But I'm sure that if you're doing enough prospecting, you're running into people telling you, we're happy with our current supplier, or I'm happy with your current supplier. I want you to understand that if they really are, then you have limited opportunity there. But now let's consider liquids. Liquids are the people who are generally satisfied with the status quo, with the current supplier, but liquids will talk to you. They'll listen to what you have to say. And the great thing about liquids is if you get a chance to talk to them, you get the chance to evaluate what they're buying and what they're doing, and you get the chance to suggest, recommend better products, better processes, better marketing strategies. And I think the great thing about liquids is when you convince a liquid to buy from you, it's usually for the right reason. They buy because of the value you bring, not just because you offer them lower prices than anybody else ever has. So the chances are pretty good that when you convince a liquid to become a customer, they become a solid for you. Gases are dissatisfied with their current supplier. Many of these people are actively looking to change suppliers. They maybe bought from one company last time, they weren't happy with what they got, so they've already decided, I'm not buying from those people again, from that guy again. And I like the gases. I mean, I like the idea that they've already made half of the decision that you need them to make, because don't ever forget that if somebody's been buying from somebody else, the decision to start buying from you has to either be accompanied by or preceded by the decision to stop buying from the other guys. So gases have already made part of the decision, but please don't ever forget the trust thing, and don't ever forget that the gases, they've been burned, so they're probably going to be more careful the next time around, which means it's very important that you work to convince the gases that they can trust you. The players are the ones who spread their work around. They typically spread their work, their orders, out among a number of suppliers, and they're price sensitive to the degree that they generally give the order to the lowest price supplier in their stable of trusted suppliers, but they won't necessarily have the cheapest supplier in town in that group, because if they did, they'd be price monsters. That's my definition for people who make all of their buying decisions based strictly and only on who's got the lowest price. Now, that raises a question. You're out prospecting and you're identifying the people you're calling on as solids, liquids, gases, players, price monsters. I hope it's obvious, I think you should be spending your time on the liquids and the gases and the players. I don't think you should be spending a lot of time on the solids with one caveat. If they're big solids, whale-sized solids, I think you want to build a plan, try and develop a plan that will keep you somewhere on their radar just in case something happens to make the relationship they have with their current supplier less solid. And that can happen, right? I mean, a quality problem, a service problem, solid can turn into a liquid or even a gas. But here's the thing. Here's the two things. Thing number one is you need to be realistic about the strength of your pipeline. If you're calling on somebody else's solids, as long as there's somebody else's solids, they're probably not buying anything from you in any kind of short term. And the other thing is, in order to justify your pursuit, they still have to have enough volume potential to make pursuing them worthwhile. Minnow-sized solids, forget about it. Whale-sized solids, that's a different story altogether. Now, price monsters. What should you do if you run into a price monster? Here's my feeling. You're not in this to perform charity. You're not in this to give the product away. You are in this to make a healthy profit or to make good commissions. You're in this to make money. I think you are. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think you are. It's been proven that you can put up big sales volume selling lots of stuff at very low margins to price monsters, but it has not been proven that you can make a good living doing this. You've got to have an awful lot of volume in order to make a lot of money on just a small piece of the pie. Here's what I think. Let's let the price monsters take up all of the selling time and resources and impact the profits of somebody else. That's what I think we should do. If they're price monsters, let them buy from whoever they're buying from. Go looking for value-oriented customers that you can really make money on. That's my feeling. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about time management. Because the question of when to prospect has both block time in linear time applications. When I talk about block time, I'm talking about filling in the blocks on any given day and making the best use of the time that you have available to sell on that day. When I talk about linear time, I'm talking about the time it takes, the number of days or weeks or months it takes to build relationships with people. So, question one, are there better times during the day, during the week, during the month for prospecting activities? I don't really think so. I mean, there is some evidence that suggests that Monday mornings are not the best time to make sales calls. There's even evidence that suggests that any afternoon after 3 o'clock is not a good time to make sales calls. But let me tell you something about the evidence. We're not talking about anybody ever proving that Monday morning is 100 times worse than Monday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What we're talking about is very slight percentage differences. We're talking about people saying, Monday morning might be 3 or 4% better than Monday afternoon. So with that in mind, here's what I think. I think that since no matter what time you pick to make a sales call, there's people you can reach and people you can't reach, people who will talk to you and people who won't talk to you. I think you would be smart to set up your prospecting activities when it makes the most sense for you in terms of your daily schedule. Understanding there'll be somebody that you won't be able to get to reach during that block of time, but don't worry about it. You can make yourself crazy thinking that, oh, I need to do all my prospecting between 10 and noon. And then, are there times when you just don't need to be prospecting for new business? I talked to a guy just this morning who told me, I'm really busy now. I don't have time for prospecting. I don't need to be prospecting. Well, what's going to happen to this guy, and it's happened to him before, is that he's going to be really busy for a while, and then he's going to be really slow for a while, because his current customers, the people who've been so active recently, are going to stop being active. And then he's going to be slow for a while. He's going to have time to prospect, but he's going to have to deal with linear time. He's going to have to deal with the time it takes to build relationships with people so they actually start buying from you. Here's my advice. Start a few balls rolling every week and keep those balls rolling. If you have more time available for prospecting, start more balls rolling. But don't ever start no balls rolling during a week. Even a minimum amount of activity will pay dividends for you. And I'm going to describe the process that I think you should follow in starting those balls rolling in just a little bit. For now, I just want you to consider a couple of things about making the time to get to the next level. The first is that there is time if you make time. People keep telling me it's so hard to find the time. My advice there would be lose the word find and understand you got to make the time to do the things that are really important to you. I also want you to understand that some things are more important than other things. It may be that prospecting for new customers is not the most important thing on your plate this afternoon, but I think it needs to be pretty high up there for all the reasons that we've discussed. And I also think that an awful lot of salespeople waste a lot of time. Waste a lot of time during the day. And I'm not talking about just wasting time calling on the wrong people here. I'm talking about they do stuff that isn't putting money in their pocket. Some things are more important than others. Keep that in mind all day long, every day. And remember that you get paid by the hour, and I say that even knowing that you don't. I mean, I don't think any of you punch a time clock and get a check at the end of the week based on 40 hours. But consider this. You get paid by the hour to at least this degree. You want to get an hour's worth of return on your investment for every hour of time you invest in your work. It's that simple. Finally, and this is no secret, this is not anything new that you haven't heard before. The secret to good time management is to plan your work and then work your plan and then keep your eyes on the prize. You're doing this for a reason. Make a plan to best utilize the time you have available every day. Follow the plan. Work the plan. And I'm pretty sure that you'll find that you can make the time to prospect for some new business. How much prospecting should you be doing? Well, how much money do you want to make? You can actually quantify prospecting activity in this way. I mean, at this point, all I can do is give you sort of the general outline of this, but consider this. X number of dollars in earnings will require Y number of dollars in sales volume. Think about your normal margins. Think about how much profit comes to the bottom line. Just for the sake of discussion, if you earn 50% margins on everything you sell and you wanted to earn $100,000, well, X, Y, the relationship is $200,000 in sales would produce $100,000 in profit. Now, I know nobody sells consistently at that level. I don't know anybody who does. But X dollars in earnings, Y amount of sales volume, it is quantifiable. And then let's consider that the increase in sales volume, the increase from where you are right now to where you want to be, will require some number of new customers. Let's call that Z, and some number of new customers, Z, will require you to evaluate, to identify, to pursue some larger number of prospects. And because not every suspect is a fully qualified prospect, ZX prospects require Z XX number of suspects. You got to look at a lot of suspects to find a smaller number of prospects to create a smaller number of customers. If you give some thought to this, how many suspects you need to evaluate over the course of a year to get where you want to go, and divide that by 50 weeks in the year, you will have calculated your PAL, your prospecting activity level, and that takes us back to what I said a little bit earlier. Start the ball rolling with some number of suspects every week, attempting to qualify them, determining which ones are real prospects. And then work in the real prospects, building the relationships, competing for their business, in the expectation that some of them are going to turn into customers. You know, it's funny. I wrote an article for a printing industry trade magazine a few years ago about how selling is a numbers game. And that article generated more letters to the editor than this magazine had had in a very long time. And most of the letters to the editor were negative. They said things like, come on, you know, it's like the 21st century. Don't you have anything better than selling is a numbers game? Well, no, because selling is a numbers game. It always has been. It always will be. More calls will lead to more earnings, and I hope if you're not sure how hard you have to work, how much prospecting you have to do, maybe this will give you some insight into the process. Now, let's get to the real meat of the program. You have numerous challenges. You have the challenge of identifying suspects. Then you have the challenge of identifying the decision maker. You know, it's one thing to identify a company. It's still another thing to figure out, all right, who within this company do I have to sell to? And then you have the challenge of connecting with the decision maker, because these days, sending an email, making a phone call, yeah, that's no guarantee that they're going to return your call, take your call, return your email, converse with you. Ultimately, we have these challenges that end with the challenge of getting the appointment. By the way, let me share another version of my definition of prospecting. It's still an activity chain that begins with the identification of suspect companies. But in addition to saying it ends with the qualification of real prospects, I want to say that it ends with the first appointment. Because I think prospecting is all about getting face-to-face with people. It's all about scheduling the first meeting, the first appointment. Now, I know that it is possible to meet with people over the telephone and end up getting some business from them. But I also think, and I hope you'll agree, that most of us are going to do our best selling face-to-face. That's what we're really looking for. So let's make prospecting all about getting that appointment. That's the end result. And prospecting ends with the first appointment because it turns into something else. Maybe not completely, because you still have the challenge of qualifying. But how about if we say it this way? That first appointment is the end of the prospecting stage, the beginning of the convincing stage, and the heart of the opportunity stage, because it's your opportunity to figure out not just what they maybe buy, but what factors may lead them to decide to buy that stuff or some of that stuff from you. All right. How do you do some of this? Let's do the how-to. How do you identify suspects? If it was me, I would start by looking at my current customer list. If I work for a large company with multiple salespeople, I would start this by looking at the whole company, every individual customer list. And the question I would ask myself is, all right, what kind of businesses do we seem to be doing pretty well with? And then I go looking for businesses just like those businesses. You've probably heard the term niche marketing. And even though you may never have made a formal decision to pursue a specific industry niche, you know, maybe you didn't decide I'm going to pursue doctors' offices or specifically veterinarians' offices or specifically veterinarians' offices in the suburbs. You may never have made conscious decisions to work at those niches, but that may have evolved. That may have evolved. You're in some niches, so let's go looking for more residents of those niches. And then beyond that, let me offer you another suggestion. You're part of an association which provides you with networking opportunities, events, calls like this. Ask your peers, when you get the opportunity to meet with your peers, ask them, what sort of companies do you do well with? What sort of industries do you do well with? It might open up your eyes to another suspect area, another area to pull your suspects from. Because there's a lot of good niches. I'll tell you this too, one of my favorite niches is the education market. And that to me ranges everywhere from major colleges and universities all the way down to a local dancing school or karate school or something like that. I like the education market, and I especially like the high end of it, the colleges and universities. And here's something I'd like you to think about. A university is actually not a customer. It's a territory. Because think about all of the different departments at a major university, all of whom could have, probably do have, promotional products needs. Think about the fraternities, the sororities, the clubs. There's an awful lot going on in a college or university. And if you're anywhere near one, I would encourage you to put them on your prospect list. But again, understand, not just a suspect, but a whole wealth of suspects in all of the individual departments. All right, so you've identified some suspect companies or organizations. How do you identify the decision maker? To do this, to get to this, I want to ask you to indulge me for just a second. I want to ask you to close your eyes and visualize your best customer or your favorite customer. It actually will work either way. But visualize your best customer or your favorite customer standing on a pedestal, and then open up your eyes again. If I were standing in front of you, I would ask you, who's your best customer? Now, we can't do it on this kind of a program, but let me tell you what usually happens. Somebody usually raises their hand. If I do this in a live seminar, somebody usually raises their hand and identifies some company. I was out in the Pacific Northwest not too long ago. Somebody raises their hand and said, Microsoft is my biggest customer, my best customer. And everybody in the room says, oh boy, I'd like to be doing business with Microsoft. But then I said, nope, they're not. And I looked around the room trying to get somebody else's attention, and another person raised her hand, and she said, my biggest customer is a manufacturer of medical devices. I think she didn't want to name the customer because some of her competitors were in the room. And I thought about that for a moment, and I said, yeah, no, you're wrong. That's not your best customer. And then I looked around the room again and tried to get somebody else's attention. And one guy in the front row said to me, dude, he said, we know it's a trick question. Get to the point. Okay, it is a trick question, and here's the point. None of you, none of us, are ever going to get rich taking good care of some company, whether it's Microsoft or anybody else. The truth of the matter is we don't sell to companies, we sell to people, we sell to individuals. Your customers are the individuals within those companies who trust you to handle some of their promotional products needs. And I hope you'll understand that that knowledge also opens up the possibility, the likelihood that you could have more than one customer in any given company. Actually, you can have customers and prospects within any given company. Actually, you can have suspects and prospects and customers and maximized customers within any individual company. The point is, it's not the company, it's the person. Now, let me ask you to close your eyes again and look at that person who's standing on your pedestal, and now open up your eyes and tell me, what's that person's title? It's been my experience that salespeople don't always know the title. Maybe they know the function, but not the title. All right, I can work with either one of those things. It turns out that certain functions and certain titles are pretty good prospects for promotional products distributors and salespeople. Marketing types, human resources types. I'm not sure I really want to call on purchasing managers, purchasing types, because they tend to be more price-driven than value-driven. But if you're calling on medical practices, it's the office manager that you're probably selling to, which means that if you're calling on other medical practices, it's the office manager that you probably want to sell to. So here's what you can get to do in our wonderful modern world. You can go online. You can do a web search, a Google search, a search on any of the engines. That will probably take you, hopefully take you to the company or organization's website, which will hopefully contain a staff directory. And if it does, you can look at the staff directory and see what are the names of the people connected to the titles that you think you want to talk to. Another possibility, if the company doesn't have a website or the website doesn't have a staff directory, many of my clients and I have had a lot of success recently going on LinkedIn and doing a LinkedIn search on the company to see what comes up. Especially with bigger companies, you very often find 5 or 6 listings coming up, people who work in the company and their titles. Now, if none of that helps, if there's no website or no staff directory or LinkedIn doesn't help you, well then we may have to go old-fashioned on this problem. But all you probably have to do is to reach out to the company, maybe visit the company, walk in and talk to a receptionist, or call the company on the phone to talk to the receptionist, and basically ask, well, who here would buy the promotional products? But it's been my experience and the experience of many of my clients that there is a better way to approach this, because there's a lot of receptionists that seem to be protective of the people that you want to talk to. So here's what I recommend if you have to go to the gatekeeper. I recommend that you call or email, that you call or visit. We're probably not going to do emailing here because we don't know who the receptionist is. But anyway, if we're doing this on the telephone, I would call and I would say, hi, my name is David Feldman from Dave's Promotional Products. And then I would say, I'd like to send some information about our company to your company. Can you tell me, please, who should I send it to? Who should I address it to? Who's the person who's most involved in making decisions about promotional products? It's been my experience that many gatekeepers are reluctant to connect you to the person who buys the promotional products if that's what you ask for. And even if that is what you ask for, that's a cold call, and I don't think you want to be making cold calls. It's been my experience that the I'd like to send some information route works pretty well on most of the people who answer the telephone or sit at the receptionist's desk. Now, let's say that they give you the name. What question should you ask next? I hope the lights are going off and you're thinking, oh, I should ask what's this person's title just to make sure that it is one of the titles I'm looking for. And maybe by process of elimination to suggest that, if I get the name of the marketing person, I might also want to ask, do you have a human resources manager? Is there an office manager? You get to ask for more than one contact when you make these calls. But now I want you to think past this, I'd like to send some information, and think about what do you want to send and how. Here's what I think. I think you just want to send a simple email in advance of making a phone call to ask for an appointment. Just a simple email, and I'll tell you what it should say in just a moment. But before we go there, you're still talking to the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper says you should send your information to Fred Flintstone, and you say, what's Mr. Flintstone's title? And the receptionist says he's our marketing director, and that makes you happy. Then I think you might say, okay, I usually send this information by email. Would that be a good way to get it to Mr. Flintstone? And if the answer is yes, then I think you can follow up and say, can you give me his email address, with a pretty good likelihood that the person will cooperate. And if the answer is no, then you're better off knowing that sooner rather than later. Many salespeople have had the experience that you call up and you ask, can you give me somebody's voicemail so I can send them some information? And I've actually heard people say, no, we don't give out that information. I mean, most people don't want any more voicemail, email. They're already getting plenty of spam. So I hope you'll appreciate the strategy of first asking, will this be a good way to get it to the guy? And then asking, okay, can you give me his or her email address? Now, here's what the email I think should say. I think it should try and communicate just 3 things. Thing 1. Mr. Flintstone, I'm writing to you because I'm told you're the person who buys the promotional products at the foundry or the whatever it is that Flintstone did for a living. Question number 2, or thing number 2. I think you might be interested in talking to me because this is exactly what I sell and I have a lot of experience. Thing number 3, with that in mind, I'm going to call you on the phone and ask you for an appointment. Please be expecting my call. That's the kind of email that I would send out to somebody. No more complicated than that. No attachments, no listing of all of the various things that you sell. I'm interested in you because, I think you might be interested in me because, So I'm going to call you on the telephone and ask you for an appointment. Note, by the way, prospecting is all about getting the appointment. That's what we're trying to accomplish. I love the idea that you tell them not just that I'm going to call you on the phone, but I'm going to call you on the phone and ask you to set an appointment with me. And that sets the stage for this phone call, this follow-up call. Hi, my name is David Feldman from Dave's Promotional Products. I sent you an email yesterday, the day before, whatever. I sent you an email and I promised that I was going to call to see if we could set up an appointment. How does your schedule look for later on this week? How does your schedule look for early next week? You may have heard, at some point, you may have heard or read that when you're making cold calls, you only get 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 9 seconds, 13 seconds, some small number of seconds to get somebody's attention. I don't know what number of seconds it is, but I think it's pretty small. And I don't like cold calls, and I don't want to put any of you in the position where you're calling completely out of the cold, and in 5 or 6 or 7 seconds, you've got to tell people who you are and why you're calling and what you want to do next. So I hope you see the wisdom in breaking this up, in trying to address smaller parts of the challenge as individual steps. An introductory email, followed by a phone call to see if you can set up an appointment. And by the way, my timing here, if I were sending out an email this afternoon, I would call to follow up sometime tomorrow morning, because I want you to consider this. One of the things we're trying to do here is to open a window of recognition. An email is not going to open a huge window of recognition. It's going to open a window that might stay open for a couple of hours. If you send an email today and call next Wednesday, I'm not sure they're really going to remember that you sent them the email in the first place. This is an example of a strategy that involves striking when the iron is hot. So now we got to talk about some of the obstacles and objections that you're likely to hear when you make these phone calls. And actually, I want to start with a gatekeeper objection, something that you often hear from, the person who answers the telephone. They often say, "Oh, we're happy with our current supplier." In other words, the gatekeeper is saying we're a solid. But that always raises a question for me. How does the gatekeeper know that? How does the gatekeeper know that the marketing director is really happy with his or her current supplier? Now, one way you could address this is to challenge the gatekeeper and say, well, how do you know this? But it's been my experience that there is a better way. It's a combination of humor and logic. Here's what I recommend you say next time the gatekeeper says, we're happy with our current supplier. Ask them who it is. And for the sake of discussion, let's say it's City Promo. Then I would say, oh yeah, they're very good. In fact, they're probably the second best promotion of products distributorship in this area. And what I hope happens is you hear a giggle or a laugh. I mean, that's what I'm looking for, the giggle or the laugh that shows that they get the joke. Because then you can follow up and say, seriously, they're a very good company, but we're a very good company. Seriously, he's a very talented salesperson, but I got a lot of experience in this industry too. Please understand this. If you run into a gatekeeper who tells you we're happy with our current supplier, that person's not telling you that they're not ever going to buy from you. That person's basically saying, I think we are a solid. So your strategy needs to be, well, let's see if you might be maybe a little bit liquid. Because remember, when you hear this obstacle, this objection, you're not trying to sell anybody promotional products. That would be putting the cart way before the horse. What you're trying to get them to do is talk to you. That's all you're trying to get them to do. And it's been my experience that this second best strategy works pretty well. And not just on the gatekeeper. Let's say that you call to follow up. The guy picks up the phone. He takes your call. You tell him who you are. You ask for an appointment. The guy says, well, I'm happy with my current supplier. Give the strategy a try. Ask him who it is and see if you can get him to smile or her to smile and see if you can provide a good reason. I'm pretty good too, a good reason to at least talk with you. Now, another common obstacle. I'm really busy right now. This is a simple solution. When would be a better time? Guy says, call me in a week, call me in 2 weeks. I would say that if somebody says, call me in a week or 2 weeks or something like that, what they're saying is, I'm willing to talk to you, I'm interested in talk to you, but I'm busy right now. So I wouldn't push any further. I would just say, you got it. And then when I made the call, I would remember to say, hi, this is Dave Feldman from Dave's Promotional Products. I hope you remember we talked briefly a couple weeks ago. You asked me to give you a call this week. And we were talking about setting an appointment. How does your schedule look for later on this week? Again, remember, this is all about trying to get an appointment, trying to get face-to-face. They may raise some other issues. They may want to talk a little bit before they agree to set an appointment. But okay, if they do that, let's deal with that. Your challenge is to get face-to-face with the person, so let's let that be the focus. What if, though, what if the guy says, call me in 6 months? I guess my experience is that when they say, call me next week, they're willing to talk to you. When they say, call me in 6 months, they're probably hoping that you'll forget about it before 6 months comes up. So here's how I think you should address that situation. You should say, okay, I can do that. But let me ask you one more question before I let you go. I think I've learned in my travels, you might say, that when somebody says, call me in 6 months, there's really two possibilities, one of which is you want to talk to me and 6 months is the right time frame. The other possibility is that you really don't want to talk to me, but you don't want to hurt my feelings, so you try to let me down easy. Please, sir, please, ma'am, don't worry about my feelings. If it's bad news, I can take it. I've had people sort of giggle and say, well, yeah, since you put it that way, I'm pretty happy with my current supplier. Well, listen up, all right, because that's a different obstacle than the one they hit you with first. Guy says, I'm really busy right now. Okay, let's see if we can deal with that. And if he throws another obstacle at you, we'll see if we can deal with that too. And understand, I'm happy with my current supplier is a whole different obstacle than I'm really busy right now. And here's another thought. And I sort of need to tell this in a story. I had an episode a few years back. I was calling to try and sell a prospect on me as a speaker. And he said, I'm really busy right now. And I said, when would be a better time? And he said, call me in 6 months. And I said, all right, are you just trying to let me down easy, not hurt my feelings? And he basically said, I really don't care about your feelings. You can do what you want. And I guess I should probably explain that I've been having a bad day that day, which might explain why I snapped back at the guy. I said, I don't get it. Why would you not want to talk with somebody who has, in this particular case, a lot of experience speaking to people in an industry just like yours? So there's like silence for a moment on the end of the phone line, and then the guy says, I'm sorry. I guess I do owe you an apology. I hope you can understand that, most people don't want to talk to any more people than they really have to. All right, you're right, we should talk. When do you want to get together? And I was very proud of myself that day. I feel like, I came up with a good strategy, which I should mention I've used in several other occasions. I don't get it. Why would you not want to talk to me and have people hang up on me? Listen up, folks. I want to admit this to you. I want to make sure you know that I know this. These strategies that I present to you today, there is nothing in selling. I've never found anything in selling that works every single time. I'm not trying to suggest that you just, do what I'm doing, do what I'm talking about, and it'll revolutionize your life. What I'm really trying to say is that the obstacles and objections are predictable. I mean, there's not that many flavors of things that people say when they're not saying yes to you. So, since we can anticipate what they're going to say, we can think about what we say. We can prepare something. We can prepare a response. And it's been my experience that, if I can give you something to work with in dealing with some of these responses, even though they won't work every time, they'll work some of the time. Now, a variation on the theme. What do you say when the guy says, I don't need anything right now? Obviously, you could say, when do you expect to need something? When would be a better time for us to talk? But I want you to give some thought to something. Most salespeople seem to think that the best prospect is the one who's going to buy something soon so you can get yourself right into competition for something. Me personally, I think the best prospect is the one who buys a lot of what I sell over the course of a year And if he doesn't happen to need something now, that's perfectly okay with me. And in truth, I actually think that's a benefit, because if I can get that person to meet with me sooner rather than later, that'll give me the opportunity to start talking about what they buy, what they do, what they buy and why, what sort of marketing their promotional products is supporting, and how effective is it. What I'm hoping is that I can get to know somebody and their needs and their wants well enough before I actually have to even quote on something, that I'll be better prepared to bring more value and also to defend my price if push ever comes to shove, which it often does. I said to a guy not too long ago, I said, it really doesn't matter to me. I mean, I don't feel like you need to have an order on your desk before it's worth talking to. I'm actually kind of hoping that I can get to know you, better before we have to start throwing prices around. He said, that actually makes a lot of sense. All right, let's get together soon, and even though I probably won't need to buy anything until later. One more obstacle that comes up pretty quickly that I want to talk about, and then we'll start talking about dealing with voicemail, which I know is a big issue for most of us. What do you say when the guy says, just send me some literature? Here's what I would say. I would say, I could do that, but it seems to me that if I said literature, that's just me telling you about me, telling you about my company. Don't you think it's more important that, that my company gets out there to start trying to learn something about you? Here's the thing. The best way to get people to do what you want them to do is to position what you want as a benefit to them. It's not enough to say, I really want to talk to you because I want to talk to you. If you can make that seem like a benefit to them, then you're talking about a winning strategy. Now, voicemail. What do you do when you get connected to voicemail? Here's what I think you do. You say, hi, this is Dave Feldman, or your name obviously, but I would say, hi, this is Dave Feldman from Dave's Promotional Products. I would say, I wrote to you yesterday. I promised I was going to call to see if we could set up an appointment. Please give me a call, 919-363-4068. Let's set up a time to get together. I know people who don't leave voicemail messages. I think that's a mistake, because I want you to think about this for a moment. In the introductory email I'm talking about, if you say I'm going to call to see if we can set up an appointment, that's a promise. And if you keep that promise, that maybe starts them thinking that they can trust you. If you don't keep the promise, if you don't leave a message that lets them know that you kept the promise, I don't think you get any trust points for that. Regardless, I'm going to leave a message, and the message I'm going to leave is, please call me back. But you know what? I'm not going to be too surprised if they don't. So my process is, I'll give them a couple of days. If I sent an email out this afternoon, I would call and follow up tomorrow. And if I ended up leaving a voicemail message tomorrow, then I would give them all the rest of the day tomorrow and all day Monday, all of the next business day to return my phone call. But then, if I don't get a call back, I'm going to call again. And if I get connected to voicemail, I'm going to leave another voicemail message. But here's my thought process. If I have to leave a second voicemail message, here's what I'm thinking. First time, I asked the guy to call me back and he didn't. So it didn't work. So this time, I'm going to raise the stakes a little more. This time, I'm going to see if I can give this guy a reason to call me back. And again, please understand this. We're not talking about selling them promotional products yet. When you're leaving voicemail messages, all you're hoping for, all you're trying to accomplish is to get them to call you back. That's the idea that you're selling. So when I'm in the situation where I'm leaving a second message, here's what I'll say. I think of this as a three-part sort of process. Part number one, this is Dave Feldman from Dave's Promotional Products. I wrote to you. I promised I was going to call. Please call me back. Let's set up an appointment to get together. That's basically the same message I left the first time, but then I continued. And I say, I'm sure you probably get a lot of phone calls from salespeople, and I'm sure that returning all those phone calls is probably not at the top of your priority list every day. But this is a call that I think you should return. Let me tell you why. I actually say that. And I've done follow-up research on people that I've left messages like this before, and here's what they tell me. They say that they get a lot of phone calls. They do. They get a lot of voicemail messages. And mostly they all just say, please call me back. And they say, when I heard you continue, and you said, I sure you get a lot of phone calls, and I'm thinking, yes, I do. I get a lot of phone calls. And you said, and I'm sure that returning those phone calls is probably not at the top of your priority list every day. Then I'm thinking, yeah, this guy understands. He gets it. And then when you said, let me tell you why I think you should return my call, I leaned forward and perked up because I'm thinking, all right, let me hear what this guy has to say. So now we come to the fun part. Why should I return your call? The answer is I don't know yet, but let me suggest a couple of possibilities. If you've been doing this a long time, if you've got 20 years of experience, that's what I think you should tell them. I think you should return my call because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that 20 years of product knowledge might be of value to you. You could even continue. You could say, in fact, if you talk to some of my current customers, which I would love to have you do, I think they would tell you that the value that they think they get from me is directly connected to all of my knowledge. I'm going to tell them why I think they should call me back because I think it increases the likelihood that they will. If you're the owner of the company, maybe the message you leave is about dealing with the owner. If you used to be on the other side of the desk, if you used to buy promotional products, maybe that's the message you want to leave. I don't know what the message is. But I want you to think about what can you say to put your best foot forward. Now, if you don't get a response to the second voicemail message, I might leave a third one, or I might send an email, again, a couple of days later. I might send an email that says, hey, I'm trying pretty hard to connect with you, to meet with you. Any interest at all in meeting with me? I had a guy at a seminar once, at a live seminar once, say, that's a really stupid way to put it. You're just making it really easy for the guy to say no. But see, my attitude is twofold. One element is I'm not worried about a no. Because if this guy doesn't want to buy from me, if it turns out that he or she is a suspect but not a real prospect, I'll just move on to somebody else. And then the other thing is I feel like I'm making it easy for them to say yes. And I've gotten lots of return emails that say, hey, I've been really busy lately, call me next week. And then I do, and then I end up talking to people. All right, that takes us to the last question I put here, how do you secure an appointment? Well, I hope you'll agree that, I've given you some ideas on how to identify suspects, how to identify the decision maker, how to deal with the objections, how to deal with voicemail. In other words, how to get an appointment. So that takes us pretty much to the end of our hour today, and I want to thank you for taking part. Rocio, do we have any questions, anything else to deal with before we finish?
No, we don't have any questions that were asked. I guess everyone's just wondering if this information is going to be available to them after. Yes, it will be. It will be on our YouTube channel, SAGNY. And I'm sure, David, if they have any questions, will they be able to contact you?
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to go back to the first slide, the title slide, which has my email address on it, dmf@davefellman.com. And if anybody wants to talk to me by phone, 919-363-4068.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David, again for joining us. It was very informative. I hope everyone found some awesome answers here. Again, you can just take note of his email address. And again, check our YouTube channel at SAGNY. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Have a good day.